everybody. We are back with another episode of the Square Community Spotlight interview series that I'm doing, and today we are joined by David Arbour. David, thank you for being here.
Thank you for having me, Andrew.
And you're basically neighbors with Joey, from what I hear, right? You're in Florida?
Yeah, I'm in Florida. Joey lives where I grew up in Sarasota, around that area. I'm in Tampa now. My wife and I are both from Florida, and then we were in DC for the last 10 or so years, and then just last year, right in the middle of the pandemic, we moved back
Oh,
to
perfect
Florida.
timing.
Yeah, yeah. It was a move that was planned. Like a lot of people left cities, because of the pandemic. We've just been trying to get out for a while, and she's like, okay, well, it happened, and we drove down in October of 2020, and it was interesting.
Jeez.
Yeah.
Well, that's a great segue because Joey lives where you grew up. So speaking of you growing up, I'd love to get the David Arbour origin story. You like that transition? They're
Yeah,
usually
that
much
was
worse.
solid.
They're usually much worse than that. So yeah, I guess could you just fill us in briefly on kind of who you are, what you do, and then take us back to how you got there?
Who I am, what I do. Yeah, sure. So I guess I would call myself a 2D motion designer or generalist. I really love 3D. I'm sure we'll talk about that stuff, but really don't get to do it for work much. So most of my 3D stuff is personal, as I'm just always trying to learn. But how I got there, I guess, I mean, it sounds so stupid, but like Star Wars. Uh,
That's not
why,
stupid.
why did anybody? Well, it's the cliche answer, but like, why did anybody want to get into a lot of this stuff? Oh, Star Wars.
Yeah.
So I went to college in Orlando for TV production, and after that, I had a job at a small production company right outside of the university. But I graduated in 2008, which for those slightly older folk might remember. That might have been the worst year in our lives financially. And so I was there for about a year, but it was just 2 employees, and I was the newer guy, and so I was the first guy to get laid off. And so I freelanced for a year or so, really didn't like it, not good at marketing myself. I was also like 20, early 20s, so I certainly didn't know what I was doing. But after that, my girlfriend, now wife, she wanted to move to DC to pursue that's international policy and stuff, State Department. And so I started looking for jobs up there, and I got a job at a nonprofit public health communications firm, and doing just video editing. That's where I began my life as a video editor. I was always interested in motion graphics, but I knew I would never get there because I didn't have any background. So I really enjoyed editing. And then I think about 5 years after that, I actually transitioned to the child company of the nonprofit. Actually owned a for-profit company. That's where I'm at now. So it's a for-profit public health communications firm. Most of our work is federal government public health. So I like to say I make government animation fun, which is possible. But yeah, so I'd say about half my career is only editing. I've been using After Effects since 2007, but really didn't know, what I was doing. I'd say really for until the last 5 or 6 years, I felt really like, okay, I know what I'm doing now. And yeah, so I'd say I'm a hybrid motion designer and video editor, and always aspiring 3D generalist.
Yeah, I was gonna say. I mean, there's plenty of things that I'd like to touch back on, but like on your looking through your online presence, I mean, you're a Premiere Pro certified expert, but you also do photography on your website, which is top notch photography,
Thank you.
C4D. Um, you're my TA currently in Expression Session, which is wrapping up, and you're super active on the MDA Slack, especially like
Yep.
the nerd questions and the
Yeah,
technical. It seems
love
like
that channel.
yeah. I mean, I think you recommended to me to tune in more to that because I was
Yeah,
looking for some answers, and I'm like, man, I'm just reading the backlog. I'm like,
yeah.
John Colombo's on there.
Oh,
I
yeah.
mean, the After Effects team. I'm like, geez, how have I been
He's
missing
my
this?
inspiration. Yeah.
And then, I mean, you also do training, and you're a TA at, or you were a TA at the Adobe Maxes,
Yeah.
yeah. So,
Yeah.
I mean, Is there any digital production thing that you don't do?
Yeah, I graphic design. So it's interesting because I think again for that certain age of us, because I mean I'm only 34, but I feel old now that they're teaching motion design in college. You either came to motion design from video editing or you came to it from graphic design, and I came from video editing, and so that's actually probably been the biggest hamper on my growth, is that I don't have a design background. Is I've got lots of technical experience, and there's certainly loads that brings to the table coming from video editing, because I didn't realize until I joined the Slack how many folks came from graphic design. And not to their discredit, but like, you don't know anything about video formats. Like, why would you if you weren't a video editor? So there's certainly a balance. Like, it's not bad that I came from video editing. Like, it has shaped my style, I guess, is that it's more technical, but I'm sorely lacking in that design. And so I work with designers for art.
It seems like you are, from what I can tell, an expert in a lot of different categories. So my question is, what's your perspective on being a generalist versus being a specialist? Because I feel like you have the depth of knowledge to go either direction.
I think I'll take that. I think I do. I'm very interested. I find everything fascinating. It sounds so silly, and my wife always laughs at me because I'll just hear like the most seemingly mundane thing, and I'm like, oh, tell me more about that. Tell me more about the logistics of city planning or something. Like, I think for me and my skill level, because we all know the hump story. Like, I think I will solidly be a generalist forever, and I'm okay with that because I do like a lot of things. I also think if I had the time or the ability, I could be a specialist, and I would like that. But that's just not where I've ever been, and I certainly respect both. And it's been interesting in retrospect. And I think being a TA has helped this. I'm always, especially being on Slack too, I'm always trying to recall where I was at a certain point. I never ever put anybody down for not knowing anything, or I really hate the phrase like, oh, this is a stupid question. If you're asking it seriously, I don't think there's any such thing as a stupid question. And so I'm often recalling where I was, years ago at a certain point, and just this is how I see my skills building up as the generalist, like just a little bit of everything, a little bit more all the time. So for me, that's what works.
Yeah, well, and I mean, to your credit, I feel like although we use the term generalist here, the depth of your knowledge, like I said, in different areas, probably puts you to a specialist level ahead of some people who are trying, behind you in the learning track, who are trying to specialize in different fields. And I guess that leads me to, I'm just personally interested, like, how did you get so knowledgeable about the technical side of After Effects and expressions, coming from especially like an editing background where you don't really use a lot of coding?
Nothing. Yeah. Where nothing. That's a good question. I've always been very detailed oriented. I like to say I don't half-ass anything. I either whole ass or no ass it at all.
Absolutely. Ron Swanson would be proud.
What's that?
Oh, Ron Swanson.
Ron Swanson,
yeah, he'd be proud.
I think one thing I love about editing is I guess because I'm a very literal person, a little too black and white for my own good, actually. And so I really thought that I've always been fascinated with 3D. I've always wanted to learn it, since I was 15. A very good friend of mine had a trainer. Like, he would come to his house and teach him 3D like once a week. And I remember he built a battle droid from episode 1. My gosh, that's so cool. I love all that, but 3D is expensive. Yeah, I guess I could have learned Blender. Oops. But I just saw that as out of reach. And then when I learned about motion graphics, I also saw that as out of reach. Like, I have no way to learn that. I don't know anything about design. I'll never be good at it. And so I really focused on editing. And one thing I love about editing is how precise you can be. And I'm a very technical person. And so for a long time, I saw myself as a button pusher. And I was actually okay with that because I just really liked the art of the technical part more than the art of the storytelling part. And so, I joke, like, I see life at 1/30th of a second. You can catch a stray frame. And so it turns out that's actually a pretty good segue for motion and graphics. I learned After Effects the way a lot of people of my age did, which, it might be bad to say it, but it was not the best way to learn from Video Copilot if you wanted to learn After Effects.
Blasphemy. That is
Yeah, I
yeah,
know,
yeah.
but he's brilliant, a genius, and he teaches visual effects. I wanted to learn motion graphics, and so the very first tutorial most people learn from Video Copilot is sky replacement. It's awesome. So I ended up learning a lot about After Effects, but I wasn't actually making anything. And so I always sort of dabbled in that more technical area. But when it came to expressions, I let them, just like pretty much everybody else has the same stories. Like, I didn't know anything about them. I didn't understand code. I wasn't good at it, and it didn't make any sense to me. And one day, it might surprise you because it was probably a lot more recent than you might be expecting, but I'd venture only in the last 5 years did I really, maybe 4 years, did I really decide to up my game and learn expressions. And so for years and years, I printed it out. I apologize to the earth, but I printed out the 12-part Pro Video Coalition. Chris and Trish Meyer had these 12-part articles on deeper modes of expressions, and I had it for years. I'm like, one day I'll learn expressions. And I took it home with me when I went to visit my parents, and I took a highlighter and a bunch of notes, and I just started reading it. And everything that I didn't understand, I put a little note next to, and I just read it a couple times. And eventually, I'm like, okay, I'll just start to get a little bit better, a little bit better. And my mantra became use one expression in every project. And it was very slow, and I did that. And that's, then every expression that you use for a bit becomes part of your toolbox. You get a little bit better, you get a little bit better. And I just, it's very technical. It's how I operate, but code is still hard. I'm certainly not the most experienced expression TA there is. And it's doing this course, TAing expression session, has helped me for sure get better with expressions, understanding, explaining, because, it's hard to dig through somebody else's project and figure out, okay, what were you trying to accomplish here? So seeing that over and over has really amped up my game too.
Yeah, and I mean, you say it was sort of a slow process, but I guess in retrospect, from where excuse me, from where I sit, I mean, 4 years to get to your level of expertise is actually pretty quick. Like, that's kind of what I aspire to do as well.
Yeah.
And you were talking about using expressions in projects. Do you mind? Because I think you were gonna. Could we transition
Yeah.
to the section where we look at some of your projects? So yeah, talking about expressions in projects. Could you talk to me a little bit about this project and maybe
Yeah.
how expressions have fit in?
So this is a project for one of our clients. So the timeline itself is very repetitive. It's just, you got, your classic background with the what do you call it? Circles, just doing nice little wiggle, very pretty. And then this same motion over and over. But because I knew that the client was going to have loads of changes, and there were going to be images changing all the time, and maybe they were going to maybe add another milestone for May, remove, I had no idea, but I knew things were going to change. I decided to take on this behemoth of a challenge and drive the entire thing with expressions, because as you can see from the way it's layered, the way it's stacked, and if we zoom out and see the actual whole project,
Mm-hmm.
this clearly could be hard coded, and each one of these could have fades, and it could just be offset and all that stuff. But I thought, no, I'm going to do it with expressions.
Of course.
Of course. And
Yeah.
so the first thing I started with was this text layer. It was the last thing I ended up finishing, but the first thing I started was, if I'm going to have 53, or was it 53? 35. If I'm going to have 35 milestones, I don't really want 35 text layers that say just the month. That seems unnecessary. And so I made what I'm calling a magic text layer, and I am so proud of this. I will dig into it.
Let's see it. Yeah.
Yeah, so basically, you can see I got my naming convention here. I can't zoom in because I'm on Windows. I don't know the magnifying
Oh,
trick. Actually,
I
I
can
don't
see.
know.
We
Can you
can
see
see
it?
it pretty well. Yeah.
Okay. So this layer, these are the milestones, and these milestones are just I clearly borrowed the inspiration of this from the Final Cut Pro drop zones, and I just made this arrow an essential property with media replacement. And outside of After Effects and Photoshop, I just resized all of my images to 600 by 600. They drop in. That way I wasn't fiddling with anything. I just dropped them in. They fit exactly. I knew. So you can see each milestone is named the year dash month dash milestone dash number. And so that, I'm going to go ahead and open each of these up. So it might be hard for me to parse through this, but I did write everything by hand. I'm very, very proud of myself for doing this, because for me, this was very challenging. Basically, what I needed to do, I'll hide the expressions for a second. What I needed to do, you can see there's no keyframes on the month layer. Everything is driven by this controller and what I'm calling this progress parameter. And so as progress goes from 0 to 1, then the milestone with that corresponding number scales up and then it holds. And then as progress goes from 1 to 2, this scales down, moves to the left, and the next one scales up. And that was a huge challenge as well. And this was something that I realized, building modularly is what I always talk about in expression sessions. That's what we teach. Basically, I tried to do too much in one expression, and I was trying to get it to do all of this movement in one, when I realized the solution in my case was to actually have the animation to pull it off to the left be driven by the transform effect.
Yep. Is that okay, that's just the transform renamed. I thought maybe you built a pseudo effect or something.
I did build a pseudo effect, which is this, and I can go through that. And so this was my I guess I'll come back to the text layer, but this is my setup, and basically everything is hidden behind except for the progress, the milestones, opacity, and that was just for basically at the end where everything fades out and it just says thank you to the awesome team. Yeah. But yeah, so I built a lovely pseudo effect for basically nothing here gets changed once I figured it out, but it's how much space is in between all the milestones, the amount between the big and the small one, how much it exits off to the screen, or exits left, yeah. And then how small the small scale is, how big the big scale is, and so this progress slider is really driving everything. So back to the text layer.
Let's get back to the text layers. I didn't mean to sidetrack my own personal desire to know how this works. I'm like, is that pseudo effect? But no, the text layers, please.
So what I wanted to do, and I actually did not think this was possible, and I started doing it, and it turns out it was, is as we go, and actually it'll probably be better if I show the post expression graph editor. I think that should do it. There we go. Yeah. So as the progress slider basically moves this to the left, the text layer fades off. So you can see this is opacity, this is exposition. So it's moving up, so it's moving to the right and fading off. And right at the one frame, this is so precise, right at this frame, it's actually switching to the next text layer. And it's jumping back, and it's starting, well, I guess you can't see my finger pointing, it's starting back over here to the left, and then fading in. So if I disable the opacity, you can see what's happening. In this case, it's two milestones named March. We'll go over here, but from like March, April. And how I did that, I don't even remember. So the exposition and the opacity was just a lot of it was linear, and then basically the trick ended up being redeclaring the same variable, which is something that I almost never do, but it is something that's done in JavaScript for like web development a lot. And so I'm using here a ternary operator, which is just a shortened version of an if statement. But no matter what, I'm executing this linear function at the end, and it's always going from my position 1 to my position 2. The difference is what value does my position 1 or 2 represent. So if progress is greater than or equal to my nearest key value, then it equals one value, else it equals a different. And then, go ahead.
This is really very clever. So it basically just automatically switches itself to
Yep.
a different value at just that right point
Just the right time.
because of its distance between the keys.
Yep. And so that's right here. Nearest key value is going to be just the nearest key to time. And then the way I figure out, am I looking, behind or ahead, is just minus 0.5, because each transition is 1 second. So it's happening right in between. And so
Wow.
that's the secret. It's happening right in between. And so that I had to get working first. And because there was no point in doing the other part if I couldn't even get it to do this, can I get it to loop? The changing part, this was new for me. I was, again, quite proud of myself. There's always stuff to learn. Was the source text, and I guess we can hide this. And so I am making an array using a loop. And so basically I'm creating this empty array called month. And this was the tricky part. I might have to come back to that. But basically I'm running a loop, and I'm running through all of the milestone layers. And I'm checking, let's see, where is it?
Oh yeah, you're checking the layer name month.
Yes, because I have multiple different layer names with, here I'm splitting by a hyphen. I have different layer names. I basically had to guarantee that I was only looking through the milestone layers. And so, I even left myself a comment. Parses layer names for month as the second item in the array. Okay, so basically, if it can split it by a hyphen and then the second item of the array, then it pushes it into a new array. And one thing that you learn at the end of expression is this awesome throw statement, and that'll let you throw a custom error. And I'm going to type throw month, and so you can see it makes this array March, April, April.
Do people you work with appreciate how technically difficult this is? Okay, well, on behalf of them and their ignorance, this is fantastic. My mind is blown, especially how you you basically redeclared the variable, or you switched the values there based on the nearest key.
Yep.
Well done, David.
Thank you. That, I have to say, this is probably the most clever expression thing I've ever done, and this just happened like a month or two ago. So I certainly didn't need to drive this whole thing with expressions, but I wanted to as a challenge because, it just wasn't terribly exciting otherwise. So I needed something for myself, and so it was a huge challenge. But yeah, getting a list of all those months and then swapping between it, I was quite pleased.
Well, for a generalist, I'd say you're on the right track with expressions. Just keep
Thanks.
at it. I think you have some future here.
Thank you.
So can we? There's so many facets of what you do that I'd love to talk more about. But could we transition to maybe some 3D stuff?
Yeah.
Because on your Instagram specifically, I see mostly 3D. And if you happen to have something pulled up.
Yeah, I can
Yep.
show off. Oops.
And your reel is mostly 3D as well.
It's funny.
Or it's kind of a mix.
It's kind of a mix. Most of the stuff I've done at work is 2D. A lot of my 3D stuff is for personal stuff. This project here was actually my first real foray into 3D. I built the whole room. The textures are very simplistic. But I basically was learning. I think I might have had just finished or was still in the middle of Cinema 4D Basecamp, and I was learning Cycles 4D at the same time. It was a terrible idea, but it's certainly one way to push yourself. And this became what they're calling like an interactive room. It basically replaced a Flash version of like this slideshow. But the room itself, I was quite pleased with how it came out. But my personal stuff, I throw my bits and pieces page, which is similar to my Instagram.
Yeah, that island, by the way, I mean, artistically, like, of course, the render. I'm not a 3D guy, so I can't comment on that. But like, I looked at it, I'm like, man, that is a really. You could see that in a video game, for sure. And I think you have a couple different angles on that as well.
Oops, yeah, I was practicing texturing there, but. Yeah, so I guess I must be on Instagram. But for this was probably like I just never did personal projects. And you listen to podcasts and everyone's talking about, oh, that's how you get better. You get the work you want to do is by making the work you want to do. And so I think it was probably mid-COVID, like the beginning. I'm like, all right, I'll just try. And I don't really know what to do. I'm not good at design, so I will make something very simple, use stock models, the Happy Toolbox models, and work on composition, because that's not my strong suit when it comes to design and all that. And this ended up being, I ended up spending more time than I thought, making a bunch of different materials and angles. But I was really pleased with how it came out, because yeah, it is a little more cartoony, but it was basically what I had hoped to achieve, and so that part I was proud of.
I sense some Mario influence in
There's a
the.
little bit of Mario influence. Yeah, I'm a big Mario fan. I have another project I'm working on now that is Mario based.
Oh
But
yeah, this
this,
lightsaber as well.
yeah, this one. So I was in a bit of a work creative slump, and just overall not really thrilled with things that were going on. And I had jury duty, and I got released very, very early. So I probably have Ryan Summers to thank for this. He doesn't know it, but I was listening to the School of Motion podcast, and I think he was talking about just sitting down and sketching an idea. And that's something that I never did. I'm not, an illustrator. I don't know how to draw. I'm not good at it. But I've always been good at like mimicking things. And that's where I feel like a lot of my confidence and enjoyment and ability of 3D comes, is that 3D is very tangible for me, and I feel far more capable in 3D than 2D, because with 2D I have to work with a designer. 3D, I can build it. I could just like literally measure it with a ruler, and recreate it. And so when I came home from jury duty, I was just kind of bored in that creative rut, and I sat down on the floor with the dog. I'm like, okay, well, I got my Disney's Galaxy's Edge lightsaber, and I took it apart, and I just started drawing it. It's got a notebook, and I just started drawing it, and I measured everything out, like down to the I started going in inches, and I'm like, oh wait, Cinema's default unit is centimeters. I got to be precise. And I started measuring everything and drawing it. I'm like, hey, that's not so bad.
I think you could have been a little bit more precise with that blade measurement there.
Yeah, I thought 78.742 was a little excessive.
Well, it's your loss when you put it in Cinema 4D.
Yeah, right. So I made the sleeves. I tried, I was just looking at different shading. I'm like, how do I the fake leather strap, how do I indicate it's wrapped around with different shading? And then this was sort of the emitter, and I even wrote myself a note. Not a good drawing you tried, though, because it's not, but it gets the point across. And so for me, I really wanted to do a personal project where I would actually complete it. And I thought if I documented it, shared it, then it would be the motivation to go through. Mm-hmm. And so I started building it. It took me a few weeks, let's see, and I started building it one piece at a time. And I was just really, it's really simple, but I was really proud of myself that I was doing it. And the emitter, trying to build this procedurally, of course, using cloners and stuff, so I'm not actually making the whole thing. And in the end, I built, it's kind of ugly. In the end, I built my lightsaber, and there you go.
And you got some redshift going on as well.
Got redshift, yeah. I can fire it up. I will make a caveat that my battery backup is slightly underpowered for my two GPUs, and so hopefully it won't beep and freak out. Yeah,
we're turning them all on.
I think the volume. Oh yeah, the volume's not going to show up this way. But there is. Oh, actually, it is. So there is fog. This material, I'm not sure why it got kind of messed up. But let me kill the fog and back out of this camera.
So about how long did this take you? I think you mentioned it, but
I wish I remember. I think I did it over a period of like maybe 4 or 6 weeks. Like in the end, it actually wasn't all that long, but I spent weekends, like almost full days sometimes on it, evenings, and just it basically came out exactly how I wanted. And I did the process that I wanted, which was concentrating on one thing, not trying to make a whole world or an environment. There we go. But yeah, I built it. I was even quite pleased with this. This is just the medallion that it comes with. That part, it's even easier now in the latest version of Cinema, but I took a picture with my phone. I threw it into Photoshop. I cut it out, And then I brought it into Illustrator and I auto traced it, and then I sent it to Cinema. The whole process, I was actually really blown away. It took like 15 minutes. And then, you just extrude it and boom, I've got this medallion that looks so intricate. And it's like, this was one of the easiest things to do in the whole project. So it's really fascinating what seems easy, what seems hard. And in the end, we got some renders that I'm pretty pleased with. Like,
Yeah.
I go back and redo the materials, but like this actually is similar to what it really looks like, because it's it's I don't know, it's fake. It's still fake. So it actually looks like the
Right.
real fake lightsaber. I suppose I could have made it look more like a real one, but it is actually kind of shiny like this. And I just wanted to mimic what it actually looked like, and then I
Oh, it
thought
turned out beautifully. And the
that's just too cool.
fog, like,
Yeah, thank you. That was the thing that actually did it. Like, it was cool, but a lot of my stuff, I always feel like I just it's missing something.
mhm.
And so when I added this volumetrics, and then I actually took this into Photoshop and used like the smudge brush, which I never used, and just sort of pulled it around, and it really I'm really pleased it came out. The final result was better than I was expecting.
I mean, you should be pleased. To circle back to the Mario theme and also 3D and procedural, before we started recording, you had one more project up in C4D. Any chance we could get a look at that?
Yeah. So I'm a big fan. There's this really goofy game called Mario Rabbids, and I'll bring up my reference board. And I thought it would be really fun to sort of recreate my own version of this world. And I thought, this is really, really a lot of work. I'll just start building one thing at a time, and maybe, again, share it as I go, and make nice looking renders. And so I did things like making the classic Mario block,
Oh
and then
yeah, this
also,
is on your.
practicing, composition and stuff. Is like, okay, the block's not very interesting, but like, how do I make it better? Yeah, so like, this is procedural, sort of grass growth. I wanted to be able to make that different, and so even this was procedural and used a little bit of code. The modulo effector in Cinema, or the formula effector, sorry, using the modulo formula to basically clone it, but only create half bricks, because most of the time, if you clone like a brick wall, it'll be offset and you'll have bricks sticking out. And so I was just making one piece at a time, and then this pipe, for those of you who have played this game, is just so ridiculous. And I wanted to make the bridge, and there are lots of different bridges here, and I thought, how cool would that be if I could make it modular, so I could build it whatever shape I wanted. And so I built
Oh, nice.
the bridge. And one thing I had to balance too with all the cloners is like performance. I built it in such a way where I was warping along a spline, and it was just so slow. So not only is it modular, I had to figure out how to make it fast, because the first iteration of this, I couldn't even spin around in the viewport. It's just so slow. So if we go to the bridge, let's see, parametric bridge. I don't know. It's just a bunch of different pieces, and kind of like I mentioned with that original expression, I was trying to do too much in one cloner, and I realized I just needed to break it up into different pieces. And so I basically have the base of my bridge, which is just one plank, these support posts, and then these fake knots. And then I clone that, and there you go, I clone that. And then the trick was not to clone the spline, or the what do you call it, the rope, but to make a separate one and then have it be distorted or driven by, you can see this spline here. So the magic of this is I built it in such a way, I have all these fun little splines, and I was really surprised that it worked, is that I've got this Mo spline, and basically we'll go with the helix. I can drop a new rail spline, or a new driving spline, and I must have something turned off. There you go.
There you go.
And it actually works, and I was really surprised that this worked. And so that means I can take the helix, and I can sort of mess with that. Okay, well, that probably takes
Beautiful. Beautiful.
no.
Okay. This is fascinating.
yeah, so I was really, really pleased with how that turned out. And you can even go, where is that? I think height bias. Oh, height. There you go.
Oh,
Yeah, like
wow.
yeah, it's because it's being shaped by the spline, and you can do so many things with these spline properties. And so I just started out with some simple ones, just an arc. Like, can I make a short bridge? Cool. Uh, can I make a spliney bridge? And then I started getting a little more dynamic, and I actually have this plane that's curved also being driven by a spline, and so it gives it a floor. So if I make, there you go. So this, I was trying to figure out how can it fit into ground, and it turns out I just make the ground also distorted or warped by the same amount. And then the one that I was really certain it wasn't going to work with
That
was the
makes sense.
flower spline. And it's not perfect, because you can definitely see, like, oops, it's
Oh, yeah.
overlapping.
I'm
But
judging you right now, David.
yeah, you should be. I'd be judging it. But I was really pleased. So I really like building things modularly. It might not be so practical if I'm only needing a few bridges, but like
Well,
I
I
was
feel like the
really,
concept here is actually extremely practical.
yeah, exactly. Like this, I mean, I managed to do it in such a way that it appears to largely not matter what the spline shape is, and performance does not suck, which was a huge, huge thing, because it was really bad, especially with this spline here, because it just cloned it so many times.
Wow.
Yeah,
Here, I'm going to switch back to us here. So, how long have you been learning 3D?
I took the inaugural session of Cinema 4D Basecamp, so I want to say that was 2018,
Oh,
maybe
not that long.
2017, and then I had been learning it on my own for, I think it was 8 months before. I did a bunch of Linda, now LinkedIn Learning training, and so what that allowed me to do is get, because my one of my strengths is also one of my weaknesses, is that how technical I am, is that I became super familiar with Cinema, the program, and I knew where loads of shortcuts and just loads of functions were, but I wasn't making anything. And so I took C4D Basecamp, and I think, like, I don't know, a month in, I was already telling people at work that I could do 3D, and I was doing little stuff because, that course is just, I've used the word before in a discussion we had, is empowering. They really just really helps you level up your skills, but it gives you that structure, so you feel like you can actually make something. So I've been doing 8 months of Linda training on my own. Didn't feel like I could make anything. I take 1 month under EJ's tutelage, and I'm like, oh, I know 3D. So just a few years, and I gave myself a goal. I'm like, in 2 years, I want to be where I am with 3D, where I am with 2D.
Mm-hmm.
And it turns out that was a ridiculous goal. Maybe I could have gotten there if I really worked harder at it, but it was just a slow process. And just like expressions, just sort of one thing at a time. And I feel like I'm at a point now where I can make a lot of stuff or do a lot of stuff, but there's still huge gaps. Like, I really don't do much animation, like almost no animation in 3D. And so, that's not terribly useful if you're a motion designer and you don't do much 3D animation. But so a lot of my stuff is still, but that's kind of the next thing, is to just maybe start adding a little motion, because I've done plenty, because I also did C4D Ascent. And so I've done plenty of animation through both of those classes, but, gotta level up more.
Well, I mean, your level at 3D, I feel like, is a level that most people aspire to. But yeah, pace yourself, man. You don't want to get too good too quick. So I feel like there's plenty more I would love to talk to you about. I guess I have one question before we get into lowlights and highlights that's completely irrelevant, but just because I also like to travel. So, which was the better experience? Seeing the northern lights in Iceland, photographing the West Maui's from Wailea in Maui, or seeing the Milky Way in Tahiti?
The Milky Way. So my wife really loves traveling, and that's what that's kind of the thing. We never really did a ton of, like, expensive things. Like, our money we put into traveling, and so certainly can thank her for all those experiences. And she's always wanted to go to Fiji, Bora Bora, and we did Fiji for our honeymoon, but we did go to Tahiti on a cruise, and we stayed at one of those overwater bungalows for just like a couple nights, the cheap overwater bungalows. And I was out there, and I love staying up till like 1, 2 in the morning, shooting the stars. And we just don't see the Milky Way in our hemisphere very often at the right time of year, or the moon is in the way. And this happened to be perfect, and it was completely dark outside, and I could almost see it with my naked eye. Like a lot of that stuff, especially the Northern Lights, you really can't see it like that with your naked eye. And so I was out there, and one of my favorite things is taking a 20-second exposure and then looking at the display and going, wow, because it's like you just can't see that with the naked eye. And so I took, I think, an 11 image panorama for the Milky Way. And the Milky Way is, I feel like I'm always chasing that, because there's always something that's stopping me from seeing it. Maybe it rises or sets to at the wrong time, or the moon's out, or whatever. So I think that. But I do remember when we went to Iceland, it was so cold.
You don't see that. And looking at the photos, you're just like, oh, I really want to go there. But then if I stop and think, I'm like, he was probably freezing.
It was so cold. Well, we left DC. It was, the weather was the same. It was about 40s, but it was windy in Iceland, and so like thermals, pants, like thermal shirt, jacket. It didn't help. I mean,
well, you were taking some long exposures as well.
Yeah. So the Milky Way, the Northern Lights, I think those are about 12 seconds, because it was actually very bright, because the moon, because you can always tell when the ground is lit up. That's the moon's pretty bright. And so my wife is standing right there, and we're looking like, oh, there's the Northern Lights. And then I took the exposure, and I just I hit her like really hard, like, holy crap, look. And I'm like, sorry, because I was not expecting to see that. Yeah. And so it's always a surprise with those long exposures.
Well, thank you for indulging that kind of non-motion related thing. Wrapping this up, I love to end on the lowlights highlights section. And the lowlights, they don't have to be some big tragic event. They can be if you want them to be, but it could also just be some sort of anecdotal lesson you learned the hard way, or something like that. Is there any lowlight of your career so far that stands out that you'd want to talk about?
I think anecdotal lesson, it might be something I learned a while ago, but am maybe grappling with now, is not having that design background is really kind of a hindrance to doing the work maybe I want to do, because I'm limited only by the skill of the designers I work with. And we just don't do much motion design right now. Things have changed a bit. So I would say not having that, or being afraid to move around, or waiting before you're ready to move. I think pushing yourself a little more is always hard. And so that's something that I'm trying to do. And that's really what I started doing with the personal projects, is like, okay, just kind of push yourself a little. And so, yeah, I think that's more of a general anecdotal thing.
Yeah. Well, let's end on a highlight, though. Is there a highlight so far from your career that stands out that you'd want to talk about?
Not necessarily work-wise, but I think being part of the community, the motion design community, it started with my involvement with Adobe, which I became an Adobe community professional, which led me to Adobe Max, where I met a lot of friends. I met Kyle Hamrick, and just moving into the MDA Slack. And then I got involved with School of Motion, and then TAing School of Motion. And so like a lot of my favorite things have happened really because of networking, and it started with my involvement with Adobe. And that really has driven a lot of where I am, and I guess my skill set and expertise is I know loads about After Effects and a lot of the technical stuff, because I'm close with the After Effects team, and you learn a lot when you're friends with those folks. So
I hear John Colombo knows a thing or two about After Effects.
He knows a thing or a million about After Effects. And so yeah, I love nerding out, and really going back to my technical side is like, why does this happen? And then also that, one thing we didn't touch on is just like one of my strong skills is troubleshooting, is part of that technical stuff. And so understanding why things happen helps you, fix the problems. And so that all of that has led to just a really well-rounded social experience with the motion design community. And I really like that. So
your troubleshooting knack for troubleshooting, yeah. I think it shines as a TA in expression session, because it must be quite the puzzle sometimes, especially with, I mean, I've submitted stuff and I'm like, I don't know how this works. Maybe David will figure, I don't
Yeah,
know.
it's hard. TAing is definitely a, a lot of work sometimes, especially with the Irish Blur assignment. I have to thank Sarah Wade for making those tip videos, because that greatly helped this last session. A lot of people, because Irish Blur especially, would get into it, and then people would just be starting off on the wrong foot. And I'm like, oh God, I don't even know where to look. And so you spend like 30 minutes digging into somebody's project, and you're like, oh, it was that. Oh God. So yeah, it's expressions, it's all that stuff has really honed my troubleshooting skills for sure.
Yeah, and I don't think it gets said enough on the square or in the course, but it's all the stuff that you guys do to look into our project files and take the time to help us with syntax, and you know, it's really appreciated. So thank you.
Yeah,
Thank you for that. So I guess to wrap it up, I've kind of hit the end of my notes, but is there anything else you'd like to say, or could you give any advice to Square members as we close this out?
Well, you're certainly more capable than you think. That's something that it took me a long time to realize. And I think everybody gets overwhelmed by how much there is to learn. And you know, that piece of advice of just do it, it's true. Just like start just do one thing, narrow your focus. And that's how I started to get better with 3D, is like, make parameters for yourself and stick to that. And then you do one, you do the next, and that really is something that I need to keep up with, but has really helped me get better at what I want to get better at.
Awesome. Well, geez, thanks, David. I feel like there's just so many awesome things that I don't know where I'm going with this, man. I suck at at ending these. Awesome.
Thank you for being you, Andrew.
Oh,
you know what? I have to say, hold on. This has to stay in. I've learned stuff about expressions from you.
Troubleshooting.
What's that?
So probably some troubleshooting things, you know.
I actually, during that timeline project, I actually went looking and I found one of your tutorials. It turned out not to be the direction I needed to go, but I watched some of your other stuff, and it's like, you know, everybody's good at something else. Like, you came to this course with loads of knowledge. You're certainly better at certain things than I am, and that's where we just all help each other out. So I'm always learning. I try to be humble about it. There's just no point in pretending you know everything.
Yeah, absolutely. I appreciate that, and I'm glad that something I did helped someone like you. And yeah, I completely agree. Like, you can learn something from everybody. Mm-hmm. Absolutely. Yeah. Anyway, I've taken enough of your time. Thank you, David, for being here. It's been a pleasure.
Yeah, thanks so much, Andrew.
All right.